It's like standing in front of the Torah. I get like awe, as you say.
Nice.
There's like a, yeah. There's a sense of awe and fear that sort of washes over me. That doesn't necessarily happen when I'm thumbing through a chumash or something like that. Okay, but when you're up there reading out of the scroll,
What if you were alone?
I think it's still
I don't think you need to worry about
the idea that you're reading from the scroll that was handwritten by somebody who had to be in a specific mental space when he was writing it and channeling divine energy when he was writing each and every letter, that somehow that divine energy is coming out of that scroll and like affecting me in some way. Yeah.
So we are actually on a different parsha than in Israel. In Israel, they are ahead of us by one, because we had 2 days of Shavuos, they had one.
I thought they were just smarter than us.
No. So we had Friday and Saturday. So that means that on Shabbos, on Saturday, we did not read the weekly Torah portion. We read something related to Shabbos.
Now I do.
They read the weekly Torah portion. And so they read, they're 1 week ahead of us. So we're on Bahaloscha, they're on Shlach. Israel's 1 ahead of us. Hey, Jude.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Excellent.
Good.
How are you? Good.
Make sure Rochelle Leal was aware of it too.
She's coming on because she's Lynn. Lynn is her minder.
She lives in New York. She works.
Oh, they moved? I didn't know she moved.
In Manhattan. She's lived there for a couple of years. Hey, Rochelle.
Thank
Hi.
you, Lynn, for calling me. She's my reminder.
I know. She is reminding you. All those years you reminded her, and now she's the one reminding you.
Hi,
Nice bridge.
Lynn. Thanks.
Where are
I
you?
think that there are some other bridges that you could be, shall we say.
That's a
where you
that
live.
that is
The background. The background.
what bridge is that?
I don't even know. Is that
It's the Golden Gate Bridge,
California?
right?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay. So she lives in New York, where they have tons of bridges, but
Right.
this is the one from.
I have the Tappan Zee Bridge.
You have the Tappan Zee?
You? Uh-huh.
All right then. Okay,
She lives in New York.
Dad. Oh, he's coming on. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Ann,
How are you?
just fine, thank you.
Okay.
All right, now close it down. Yeah, we're in Milwaukee. Those birds with them.
Because they have two. Let's go mute. Okay. All right. So in the middle of this parsha, of this Torah portion of Ba'aloscha, there are 2 inverted nuns. And in between those 2 inverted nuns they're sort of like parentheses, although so in the opposite directions, but they function sort of like parentheses. And they actually are in the scroll itself. You'll see these two inverted nuns in the scroll itself. And in between them, you have Vayihi ben Sora. One of the verses is Vayihi ben Sora Aaron Vayom Moshe Kuma Hashem V'yafut Zoivecha V'yanusim Misanechem B'panecha, which is when you first take out the Torah, you say that. And then you have a line that you say when you put back the Torah. Uvanucha Yomar, when it rested, he will say, Shuva Hashem, Rivos Alfei Yisrael, return Hashem, the tens of thousands of Israel. Anyways, they're in between these inverted nuns. And if you look at the commentaries, they will tell you that actually they are just placeholders, those two lines. They don't even really belong there. They're put there just so there be something in between those two nuns. But really, the two nuns themselves in between are empty. There is a midrash that says that there are 7 books in the Torah, not 5. You would tell people there are 5. You would be wrong. There are 7. There are 7 books in the Torah. There is Bereshit, book 1, Shemot, book 2, Vayikra, book 3, Bamidbar up to the first inverted nun, book 4. In between the two nuns, book 5. Bamidbar from there to the end, book 6. And the book of Devarim, book 7. So it ends up that the space between the nuns is called a book. Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik from Brooklyn and New York, of blessed memory, he suggested that this is the book of what could have been. That at this point, there's a fork in the road. There are 2 options. There's what we'll call the short way, and there's the long way. The short, easy way, and the long, hard way. And the Jewish people choose the long, hard way instead of the short, easy way. So there's some kind of fork in the road. We could go in one of 2 directions. We chose the long, hard road. The short, easy way would have taken us 11 days. The long, hard road is going to take us 38 more years. The long, hard road is going to go through the spies and the aftermath of the spies. The short, easy road would have bypassed that. We might have done the spies, we might not. We might not have even done them at all. Or we might have done them and then there would have been the 11 days. But we wouldn't, but it's very likely we wouldn't have even done the spies at all. It wouldn't have even happened. The discussion of that, why we went in that direction, I'm going to leave we've talked about it before in the Torah portion of Shlach, the next Torah portion with the spies, and maybe we'll do it again this year. But for whatever reason, we chose this way, and this was a rough way. Right after this, you have the people complaining they want meat. And there's something about this complaining that is different than previous complaining. Moshe takes it very seriously. He's very concerned about it, very, very concerned about it. He wasn't, it doesn't seem as concerned before about these kind of things, but this one he's very, very concerned about. And as we've talked about in the past, he saw something different in their eyes. That there was something happened. The people are complaining, but in a deep way that he can't think of how he's going to overcome this. I'm studying with a group of people. I'm studying, we just finished studying this book called The Lost Princess. It's got another name as part of it, but it's about the lost princess, the story of Rav Nachman of Breslov, one of his stories. And it's by Yaakov Klein, Rabbi Yaakov Klein, and it's a very good book. And we were studying it as part of like a book club. At the end of that book, there are appendices. And the first appendix, he shares what is considered a deeper Breslov teaching. It's a teaching of Rav Nachman. And Rav Nachman says that the word derech, which means way or path, that the word derech in gematria is equivalent to the word baki, which means expert, twice. So if you double the word baki, you will get the word derech. Derech means way, so you're walking along a way. Our path with God is called a way. And that way consists of two kinds of expertise. There's a person who's an expert on the way up, and there's a person who's an expert on the way down. The way up is called ratso, like running towards, or ratso. And the word on the way down is called shav, which can mean return, like return. So a candle, the candle flickers up, and then it flickers down. It flickers up, there's like a dance of the flame of a candle. It like moves up, then comes back down. It moves up, and then comes back down. It moves up and comes back down. This is a kind of dance of creation. Creation moves up and it comes down. It moves up and it comes down. This is symbolized by the moon. The moon moves towards fullness, then it comes back. It moves towards fullness and it comes back. It moves towards fullness and comes back. The relationship of the Jewish people with Hashem is reflected in the moon and this notion of Ratzov V'Shov, and the relationship of each of us as individuals within our service of Hashem has Ratzov V'Shov. It has elements where we're going up and elements where we're coming down. And there's such a thing as being an expert in going up and an expert in coming down. I'm going to use the term manage. To manage our going up, there's managing our going up and there's managing our coming down. So one example of this might be you're visiting Israel. You're visiting Israel and you know you have a limited time there and you want to make the most out of it. So there's a wisdom to making the most when you're in a place like that. How do I make the most out of it? And then there's a kind of wisdom in managing your life when you're not there. So let's say when I'm there, I recognize even before I go there that when I'm there, there's going to be a kind of spiritual opportunity. Maybe I'm going to feel a spiritual awakening and sense of connection to God that I don't feel here. So I want to manage that. I want to make the most out of that. I might actually plan my trip with elements that allow me to make the most out of it. And then when I come back, I might try to manage the way back down. When I was a student in yeshiva in Israel, and this is something where almost every yeshiva student in Israel contends with this. So when I was in Israel, I'm in yeshiva, in the yeshiva environment. I'm studying, I'm davening, there's like a kind of intense spiritual routine. When I would come home for vacation, not so much. Now, the first time that happens, I'm sort of surprised by it. And not only am I surprised by it, but I'm disheartened by the fact that I am like a wet noodle when it comes to standing up to the pressures of being back, let's say being back home. So for instance, I'm assuming that when I'm home, I'll study a few hours every day. Not happening. I'll get up for minyan. No, I will, whatever it is, I have all these assumptions that is going to happen when I go back, and they just go right out the door like 4 hours after I'm home. That's already out the window. So the next time, that happens one time. I'm in Israel for many years. So the next time I come back, I go, well, that's not happening again. This time I'm going to really stand up to it. And then I go back and boom, right back, all the same stuff again. So now I realize that this is a force to be reckoned with, going back. It has nothing to do with being home. Obviously, it has to do with being in the Chutz La'aretz and not being in a yeshiva setting. But now I realize this is a force to be reckoned with. So I seek wisdom. And I'm told, you know what? Set the routine up before you go home. Find yourself a chavruta before you get home. Do these kinds of things. And now I start to apply wisdom. This is the wisdom. This is what the expert at managing the coming down, what we'll call the coming down, the spiritual coming down. But there's also management required when it comes to the spiritual going up. So like, for instance, I think if let's say I'm visiting Israel, I don't live in Israel, let's say I'm visiting Israel. So when I'm visiting Israel, I think that if I do X, Y, and Z, I will maximize all the stuff of being in Israel. And then I find out that when I did X, Y, and Z, it didn't really do that. Or some of them did and some of them didn't. So now the next time I go, I hopefully, we'll think it through. Maybe I'll look back and say, well, when I did this, that worked, and when I did that worked. This didn't work so much, or that didn't work so much at this place. Maybe I'll try a different place. Maybe inspiration from here when I was doing that, and I'll try to add some of that kind of wisdom. I also might speak to other people about the kind of thing that they felt maximized their time in Israel spiritually. We're not all the same, but there might be some things I can learn from other people. That might be an example of mastering or becoming an expert in the way up, in something like the way up. One time, Rabbi Michal Tursky Shlita shared with me a Hasidic insight on a midrash. The Torah, at the beginning of the Torah portion of Vayetze, it says, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, Vayelech Harana. Yaakov left Beersheva and he went to Haran. He's going to Lavan because of Esav. He's going to go spend some time with Lavan. And so it tells us he left Beersheva to go to Haran. The Midrash asks, why does it tell us that he left Beersheba? We know that's where he was. Why is it emphasizing he left Beersheba to go to Haran? So the Midrash says that when a tzaddik is in a place, hu ziva, hu hoda, hu hadra, he is the shine, he is the splendor, he is the glory of the place. When a tzaddik leaves the place, Osa Roshem, which is usually translated as he leaves a void. And now there is no more splendor or shine or glory. But the Hasidic reading of this Medrash is Osa Roshem. What does it mean, Osa Roshem? He makes a mark. So what does it mean he makes a mark? It means he marks the way that he left, like Hansel and Gretel, except not with with breadcrumbs. But the idea is that if I leave a path, a trail, I'll be able to go back up. So Yaakov is in Israel. He is in the home of his parents, or he's in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, whatever. He's in Israel, and he's in a place of spiritual height. And then he's going to go to the house of Lavan, which is depth. He's going to be going down. So he is preparing for that. And part of the way he prepares for going is not just living in the house of, it says that he learned in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. Shem and Aver are is a child and grandchild of Noah. What is the yeshiva of Shem and Aver? Moshe Shapiro, blessed memory, suggested that it is the Torah of transition. It's the Torah of being in one world and then going to the next. Shem was in the world before the flood, and then he was in the world after the flood. He is somebody who knows how to survive transition from one world to the next. Aver, the word Aver actually means to cross over. So Aver himself, the word means to cross over. So the yeshiva of Shem and Aver means the Torah of crossing over. So he's studying the Torah of crossing over. That's what he's doing. And then he's he's preparing for what's about to happen. And then Osa Roshan, he makes marks so that he can find his way back up. Because what happens? Let's say you're in the zone. Whatever it is that you do, you're in the zone. You're a baseball player, and suddenly you're hitting everything that's thrown at you. The baseball is the size of a watermelon by the time it comes to you. You could hit it, outside, inside, in the ground. You could hit it no matter what. In that period of being in the zone, what do? What happens? So there's some people who have never been in the zone before, or they don't think very much. So they're in the zone and they don't even recognize that's what's going on. They just are hitting everything. They think this is the way it's going to be for the rest of their life. They're just going to be able to hit everything. It lasts for a week or a few days, and then suddenly the baseball returns to being a baseball, and they can't, they hardly hit it. So, and that we'll call this person the simple person. Then there's somebody, we'll call him the wise person. The wise person's been there before, and they understand they're in the zone and it doesn't last. But the wise person is going to be wise about it and just say, I'm going to try to make the most of it while it lasts. And then when it's not here anymore, it won't be here anymore because it doesn't last. The tzaddik doesn't just recognize that it's temporarily here and try to make the most out of it. The tzaddik actually tries to find a way back. When we go on trips, let's say you went on a trip to Israel, or you went on a trip and you're not going to be able to do that often. Maybe never again. You're having a trip like that. You're never going to be back there never again. And so how would you do it in the tzaddik method? So one thing you might do is make a friend there and stay connected with the friend. Maybe you can't visit, but the friend will come and visit you, or you'll write to them, or you'll call them, or you'll something, but you have this connection to somebody that's there all the time. You'll buy souvenirs or something that connects you to the place. I had 2 years ago, I had this particular wonderful Pesach. My dad and Judy were there with me. We were staying with Shauli, my son, and it was a glorious Pesach. And part of the glorious Pesach was the shul that we were davening in, and they used a certain sitter in that shul. It was a shul Shauli regularly davened in, and I had a couple really lofty prayer moments there. And so I decided I'm going to buy that sitter, and I'm going to always use that sitter. And I still feel it. I do. I knew it what I was doing when I did it, and it actually does it. That I feel the connection to that moment when I use that sitter. I feel connected to it. That's an example of the breadcrumb, of creating a way back to that place, to get to that place. So b'yetzias hatzadik min hamakom osa roshem. When a tzaddik leaves a place, he leaves a mark. That's one of the ways that you can manage the ratzo, the going up. I'm sorry, that's one of the ways you can manage the going down. One of the ways you can manage the going down is you recognize while you're up that this will be useful to connect, because you know you're going to go down. So you're already, when you're going up, looking for ways to connect, ways that are going to bring you back. That's actually part of the management of going down while you're up there. But there's another thing about managing the going up, and this is something that I sometimes experience, and I'm certain other people experience this as well, which is I become self-conscious on the way up, and in some ways, the self-consciousness can sabotage the going up, because thoughts can start to come in your head that you don't deserve this, that you're not really warranted, that they don't last, it doesn't last, the other shoe is going to drop, something's going to happen. Because when things are going really well, you start to get these self-defeating thoughts. So managing those thoughts is a part of managing the way up. It's a part of managing the way up, because as I'm going up, it could be, I start to get to a certain place and I don't let myself go higher. Let's say the going up is part of my career. There's something happening in my career that is just moving in a particular direction. It may be in a direction I've always wanted it to go, maybe even better than I thought it could go. And I'm starting to have self-defeating thoughts, these voices in my head that are suggesting to me that I don't belong here, or something's going to happen. And they take the steam out of the upward mobility of it, and then it starts to come back down. Managing those thoughts is part of managing the way up. Part of managing the way down is to make sure that I don't crash as I'm coming down. Because sometimes if I've had a way up and I'm coming down, I can make decisions or think something is happening, because I could be surprised by the fact that I'm coming down and the way it's happening, and then sort of give in to the coming down. And then the coming down becomes a disaster. So like, for instance, when it comes to, let's say you're trying to manage your weight and you're going like to Weight Watchers. So this is something that is spoken of a lot at the meetings, that just because you had a bad day and you ate stuff you weren't supposed to eat, don't let that being an excuse to just go off the rails. It doesn't have to be, it's okay. And you have to, you sort of develop a kind of a mantra or several mantras that allow you to see it as just a day. And this doesn't have to be anything more than a day. And this is part of the managing of going down, because if you go off the rails and then give up the whole routine, the whole system for it, you could end up going into harm, from this thing, even though, and part of the thing is, part of what they're trying to explain to you is it happens. This is part of what happens. You have good days, you have what you would call bad days. That's just part of it, because that's what it is. They're not calling it Ratzon V'Shov, the flickering up and flickering down, but that's what it is. It's flickering up and flickering down. There's managing the going up and there's managing the coming down. For most of us, the managing the coming down is going to be more important than the managing going up. Although not always, but for most of us, that's where we're gonna need to apply the wisdom. Our culture is not helpful, very helpful at preparing us for the going down and what it means. In our culture, there's not a lot of forgiveness for the side where you're coming down, and not a lot of wisdom for how to manage it, for what it means and to manage it. So like, let's say you are at Weight Watchers and you're hearing people say it's okay to have a bad day. It sounds like a completely new thing. I'm whatever years old, and I've never heard people say that it's okay to go off the rail, that's going to happen, and it's completely okay. It sounds new, and therefore I don't really believe it. I don't entirely believe it, and I'm not entirely sure what they mean. How could that be? My whole life I've been having this rhythm of up and down and up and down. How is it that I could be 60 years old or 50 years old or 40 years old or however old the people are in that class, and it's not a very familiar thing, and I'm not well taught. I'm not well experienced when it comes to managing that aspect of my life. How is that possible when it's been happening so often in my life? And how am I not an expert in managing this? But I'm not, and very few of us are. And when it happens, it seems like unexpected and terrible that it happened. And it's a source of shame and embarrassment, and we have little coping mechanism for it. Again, this is something that's been going on practically since I was born, and I still greet it as if it's some new and strange trouble. And this is part of that wisdom that Rav Nachman's talking about, which is becoming an expert on the going up, but also an expert on the coming down. In Breslov, his big concern is despair, what they call despair, and not falling into despair, because when you fall into despair and you sort of give up, that's where things go to places where they never needed to go to, and they only can go there because you're taking clues from something that happened, and you're somehow not you're not seeing it as normal. You're not seeing it as, you're not recognizing it for some reason. I'm not recognizing this as something that happens all the time, and it's okay. I just need to do a soft landing. I'm gonna come down, have a soft landing. There might be some people that need to go into, at least for men, need to go into my cave. I'm gonna go into my cave for a few days, and I'm just gonna sort of nurse myself inside the cave for a few days, and then when I'm ready, I'll come back out into the sunlight.
With or without the whiskey bottle.
Right. And but it's like, because this is a kind of safe place to decompress, a safe place to have my low. And so I've sort of found it. Do I want to be in that place all the time? No, but once I recognize the symptoms, I know that's where I need to land. I need to aim for that, and I'll do that. And people will say, why aren't you out? Come out, we need to go, etc. And you're just saying, I think I'll just hang out in the cave for a few days. And you feel maybe like you're letting people down or something, but it's mild. It's a mild issue compared to where it could go if I don't steer it over there. But I know enough to steer it there because I know what it feels like, etc. So this, what happens is we're going to say that these two roads are the going up and coming down. These are the two paths. You could either go up or you could come down, or they're both coming down, but one is coming down in a sort of safe way, and the other one is coming down and crashing. And that's the most likely, more likely scenario, that both these paths were going to be coming down. But one was coming down kind of safely, and one was coming down with a crash. And the people came down with a crash, completely crashed. And in a way that caused a lot of damage and harm. So that's A. So this story, or the story after this, which starts with the grumbling about the meat, it could have gone in, we're going to call it going in two directions. It could have gone down a little bit, but it ends up going and crashing. And I'm going to suggest that Moshe is trying to guide it into the just, going into the man cave kind of crash. But it ends up crashing and burning. So you could say it's about managing the way down, that part of the story from then on, about managing the way down. But also it's a story about how even if you burn and crash, there's life after that too. And sort of managing that, because even after that, there's a way back up. There's a way back up. And that's also hugely important to know. So much so that you could say that even though for the people at the time, it was the worst scenario, if you're talking about learning from people's experiences, it could be argued that we learn a lot more from the fact that the people crashed and burned than we would have if they would have taken a soft landing. The soft landing would have been an interesting lesson, but learning that you can crash and burn like that, and there's still life after crashing and burning, that's a massive lesson, a very important lesson, and about the fact that, and also about the fact that this happens, that also happens, and very likely to happen in a lifetime, that there's going to be these kind of crashing and burnings, and to know there's a life after that. For some reason, our culture just doesn't give us instruction about these things, and the Torah does. The Torah does, to the point where people think it's strange and upsetting that the Torah does. One of the things that is most upsetting to people when they read the story of the Jewish people in the desert is how often the people complain and collapse, right? As if this doesn't happen in our regular lives. It's like as if we don't see this as a reflection of life as it truly is. Why would they do that? They saw God at Sinai. They all sorts of. Do you not recognize this is our lives? What's going on over there? It happens to us all the time. This is real, but for some reason we're bothered by it. How come they didn't, weren't perfect? How come they saw God and they weren't perfect afterwards? How come that we've never seen, but for some reason expect that it happened? And the stuff that we see all the time, which is reflected actually in what goes on in the desert, that we're like mystified by. How could that be? It's so strange. And it makes sense that more of that is going to be reflected than the other stuff, because this is where we need to learn from. We need to learn the lesson of what happens when you collapse. What happens when you fall down? Mastering the way down. That having been said, for a lot of us, we also need to spend some time on mastering the way up, because it is true for a lot of us that we tend to sabotage the way up. And there is a lot more possibility available. There's a lot more that is possible and available than we allow ourselves, because when things are going right, we don't let it fully happen. There is a lesson that we in the Midwest have learned that not everybody in the rest of the country has learned. And that is how to get out of a rut. Let's say if there's snow and your car gets stuck in the snow. So what we have learned to do is to rock. you try to get out. If you don't have four-wheel drive, you're trying to get out of the rut. And so you rock. So you go forward, you go like this, up a little bit, then you come back a little bit, and then you go up a little bit, and then you go back a little bit. Now, you could think that all your life is that, just going up and coming down and going up and coming down. But you've experienced it, and your goal is that at some point you're going to go up and down and up and down and up and down. And one point you're going to go over and out. So this is another lesson about Ratzov V'Shav, which is that although I spoke of it as just going up and down, and that life is just about going up and down like the moon towards fullness and then back and forth. It's not entirely like that. There's up and down and up and down and up and down. But a part of mastering it is that there could be a moment where you get to that lip towards the top and you go over and you've moved to a completely another plane. Now, when you're on that other plane, eventually there's going to be up and down on that plane too, but you're going to get there. So it's not just 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. Eventually at some point, and this is also part of managing the way up and the way down. And sometimes you come out through the way down, which is even more surprising. You come out going backwards and not just forwards, but you go out, you go to another plane. That's also possible in your growth. At some point, you can get to a place where you're no longer struggling with the same things you struggled before. You're done with them, and you're on to something new. That something new is eventually has ups and downs too, and it's going to have its own. And then hopefully one time you're out of that one and you're on to another place. I've mentioned on several occasions this interview that Terry Gross had with a father and son who wrote a book about the son's addiction and the experience of the father and the son over years of the son's addiction, which included 5 or 6 times in rehab. And at one point in the interview, he's telling Terry Gross about some lessons he learned in a particular stint in rehab. And she said, well, apparently you didn't learn those lessons because you had to go to rehab like 3 times after that. And he suggested that what he thinks happens is that you learn lessons from each time, but you don't have a core. You don't have enough yet. There's a word for it. You don't have whatever we'll say it is. But you at one point you gather enough of these elements together and they can form a basis, and then you can finally move beyond it. But so he still feels that even though he had to go back into rehab, that a life lesson was learned in the previous one. And at some point you're learning, you're hoping that you're going to gather enough so that it can represent some kind of firm footing that you can eventually move out of it. And it would be something like that, again, where you're rocking back and forth, and eventually you're able to get out and move beyond. So it could seem like for a long time your ups and downs are in the same place, and then some point you move on. And this can be with things like your managing of your anger, or managing your weight loss, or managing exercise, or managing routine for something like writing practice, or who knows, that you have your moments, then you come back, you have your moments, then you have to come back, and you're having your up and down, and at some point again you're able to rock out of it and move on to that next place. So when we talk about being a bucky, like Nachman of Breslov saying, that the way, this way, which we'll call the way of God, or the way of our service, the path of our life in this world, this way requires being an expert or managing the way up and the way down. And there are several ways that that's manifest. The way up sometimes is just being in the zone. The way down is falling out of routine. Managing the way down could include things like paying attention to how to get back to the way up, or it could be coasting into a cave. And managing the way up might mean making the most out of that time, absolutely experiencing the way up to the fullest that I can. Or it could even mean managing the way up to overcoming my self-defeating behavior that doesn't let me fully explore the heights of the way up. And managing the way down could include life after a complete crash, and that there's life afterwards, and putting that together and making that work. And managing the way up could even mean the rocking back and forth to that point where I'm able to rise over and move on to a new challenge. And again, I'm suggesting that based on that teaching of Rabbi Soloveitchik, that there was a point where the people had two paths. I'm assuming that the two paths were two different ways to go down. The kind of going into the man cave kind of way to go down, or the crashing way to go down. And that we need to learn that, maybe even more than we need to learn how to manage the way up. Obviously, that's very important too. But for many of us, especially those of us who live in Western culture, who it's never spoken of. It's just never spoken of. And we don't get, and every time we fail, or every time we collapse, it's like some embarrassing new reality that I've never experienced before, or other people don't experience. And so we need to learn how not only to expect it and that it's okay, but to manage it. Not just to, in the words of Breslov, not just to not fall into despair, but to manage the entire experience so that it becomes part of that rocking that we need in order to get out. And that is that. I look forward to doing this again next week. I'm very
Same time,
grateful for
same
doing it
place.
with you guys. Be well.